everyone, today we're going to be starting on 1 Kings, and we're going to go from chapter 1 to chapter 6. I sent out a Facebook post about like how we're going to do the king videos, and a bunch of crazy stuff goes down, like prophets, like Elijah and Elisha, but during all that there's Jonah, Obadiah, and Nahum, Habakkuk, all those guys. And so I'm going to split them up in chronological order. We should be able to go through the book of 1 Kings without having to stop for a prophet. But as soon as we're done with 1 Kings, we are hitting the prophet Obadiah. And then starting on 2 Kings, going on. And the first prophet after we start 2 Kings we're hitting should be Jonah. The boy, the man who got stuck in a well. But I looked up some videos on how to pronounce some of these names that we're about to be reading about, so I shouldn't mess up on most of them. But let's get started. Chapter 1. When King David was very old, he could not keep warm even when they put covers over him. So his attendant said to him, "Let us look for a young virgin to serve the king and take care of him. She can lie beside him so that our lord the king may keep warm." Then they searched throughout Israel for a beautiful young woman and found Abishag, a Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The woman was very beautiful. She took care of the king and waited on him, but the king had no sexual relations with her. Now Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, put himself forward and said, "I will be king." So he got chariots and horses ready, with 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had never rebuked him by asking, "Why do you behave as you do?" He also was very handsome, and was born next after Absalom. Adonijah conferred with Joab, son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar the priest, and they gave him their support. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, Shimei, and Ray, and David's special guard did not join Adonijah. Adonijah then sacrificed sheep, cattle, and fattened cows at the stone of Zohidleth, near En Rogel. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaiah, or the special guard, or his brother Solomon. Then Nathan asked Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, "Have you not heard that Adonijah the son of Haggith has become king, and our lord David knows nothing about it? Now then, let me advise you how you can save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Go into King David and say to him, 'My lord the king, did you not swear to me, your servant, surely Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? While you are still there talking to the king, I will come in and add my word of what you have said.' So Bathsheba went to see the aged king in his room, where Abishag the Shunammite was attending him. Bathsheba bowed down, prostrating herself before the king. "What is it you want?" the king asked. She said to him, "My lord, you yourself swore to me, your servant, by the Lord your God, Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. But now Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord the king, do not know about it. He has sacrificed great numbers of cattle, fattened cows, and sheep, and has invited all the king's sons, Abiathar the priest, and Joab the commander of the army, but he has not invited Solomon your servant. My lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are on you, to learn from you who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise, as soon as my lord the king is laid to rest with his ancestors, I and my son Solomon will be treated as criminals." While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived, and the king was told, "Nathan the prophet is here." So he went before the king and bowed with his face to the ground. Nathan said, "Have you, my lord the king, declared that Adonijah shall be king after you, and that he will sit on your throne? Today he has gone down and sacrificed great numbers of cattle, fattened cows and sheep. He has invited all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. Right now they are eating and drinking with him and saying, 'Long live King Adonijah.' But me, your servant, and Zadok the priest, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and your servant Solomon, he did not invite. Is this something my lord the king has done without letting his servants know who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him?" Then King David said, "Call in Bathsheba." So she came into the king's presence and stood before him. The king then took an oath, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, I will surely carry out at this very day what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place." Then Bathsheba bowed down with her face to the ground, prostrating herself before the king, and said, "May my lord King David live forever." King David said, "Call in Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada. When they came before the king, he said to them, Take your Lord's servants with you, and have Solomon my son mount on my own mule, and take him down to Gihon. There have Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him king over Israel. Blow the trumpet and shout, Long live King Solomon. Then you are to go up with him, and he is to come and sit on my throne and reign in my place. I have appointed him ruler over Israel and Judah." Benaiah son of Jehoiada answered the king, "Amen. May the Lord, the God of my lord the king, so declare it. As the Lord was with my lord the king, so may he be with Solomon to make his throne even greater than the throne of my lord King David." So Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, the Kerethites, and the Pelethites went down and had Solomon mount King David's mule, and they escorted him to Gihon. Zadok the priest took the horn of oil from the sacred tent and anointed Solomon. Then they sounded the trumpet, and all the people shouted, "Long live King Solomon!" And all the people went up after him, playing pipes and rejoicing greatly, so that the ground shook with the sound. Adonijah and all the guests who were with him heard it as they were finishing their feast. On hearing the sound of the trumpet, Joab asked, "What's the meaning of all this noise in the city?" Even as he was speaking, Jonathan son of Abiathar the priest arrived. Adonijah said, "Come in, a worthy man like you must be bringing good news." "Not at all," Jonathan answered. "Our lord King David has made Solomon king. The king has sent me with Zadok the priest, and Nathan the prophet, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and they have put him on the king's mule. And Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king at Gihon. From there they have gone up cheering, and the city resounds with it. That's the noise you hear. Moreover, Solomon has taken his seat on the royal throne. Also, the royal officials have come to congratulate our Lord King David, saying, May your God make Solomon's name more famous than yours, and his throne greater than yours." And the king bowed and worshipped on his bed, and said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has allowed my eyes to see a successor on my throne today." At this, all Adonijah's guests rose in alarm and dispersed. But Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, went and took hold of the horns of the altar. Then Solomon was told, "Adonijah is afraid of King Solomon and is clinging to the horns of the altar. He says, Let King Solomon swear to me today that he will not put his servant to death with the sword." Solomon replied, "If he shows himself to be worthy, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground. But if evil is found in him, he will die." Then King Solomon sent men, and they brought him down from the altar. And Adonijah came and bowed down to the king Solomon. And Solomon said, "Go to your home." When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. "I am about to go the way of all the earth," he said. "So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the laws of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel." Now you yourself know what Joab son of Zeruiah did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's armies. Abner son of Ner and Amasa son of Jether, he killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and lead them be among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember, you have with you Shimei son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. But now I do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood." Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron, and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Now Adonijah the son of Haggith went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" He answered, "Yes, peacefully." Then he added, "I have something to say to you." "You may say it," she replied. "As you know," he said, the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king, but things changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." "You may make it," she said. So he continued, "Please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife." "Very well," Bathsheba replied, "I will speak to the king for you." When Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on her throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. "I have one small request to make of you," she said. "Do not refuse me." The king replied, "Make it, my mother, I will not refuse you." So she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request a kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Yes, for him, and for Abiathar the priest and Joab son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David, and has founded a dynasty for me as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today." So Solomon gave orders to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah, and he died. To Abiathar the priest the king said, "Go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships." So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah though not with Absalom, he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah son of Jehoiada, "Go strike him down." So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.' But he answered, 'No, I will die here.' Benaiah reported to the king, 'This is how Joab answered me.' Then the king commanded Benaiah, 'Do as he says. Strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood that he shed, because without my father David knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with a sword, both of them, Abner son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa son of Jether, commander of Judah's army, were better men and more upright than he. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever. But on David and his descendants, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever." So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried at his home out in the country. Then the king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in Joab's position, and placed Abiathar with Zadok the priest. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." Shimei answered the king, "What you say is good. Your servant will do as my lord the king had said." And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath, and Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." At this, he saddled his donkey and went to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. And Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath, and he had returned. The king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you on the day you leave to go anywhere else, you can be sure you will die? At that time you said to me, 'What you say is good, I will obey.' Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you?" The king also said to Shimei, "You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing, but King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever." Then the king gave the order to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. The kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given him by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place, and Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him, and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child, and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people, and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his court. Now 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, Pardon me, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I had a baby while she was there with me. The 3rd day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the 2 of us. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, his servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. The next morning I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born. The other woman said, No, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours. But the first one insisted, No, the dead one is yours, the living one is mine, and so they argued before the king. The king said, This one says my son is alive and your son is dead, while that one says, No, your son is dead and mine is alive. Then the king said, Bring me a sword. So they brought his sword for the king. He then gave an order, Cut the living child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other. The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of love for her son, and said to the king, Please, my lord, give her the living baby, do not kill him. But the other said, Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in 2. Then the king gave his ruling, Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother. When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe, because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. So King Solomon ruled over all Israel, and these were his chief officials: Azariah, son of Zadok the priest; Elihoeth and Ahijah, son of Shisha, secretaries; Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, recorder; Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, commander-in-chief; Zadok and Abiathar, priest; Azariah, son of Nathan, in charge of the district governors; Zabud, son of Nathan, a priest and advisor to the king; Ahishah, palace administrator; Adoniram, son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. Solomon had 12 district governors over all Israel who supplied provisions for the king and the royal household. Each one had to provide supplies for 1 month in the year. These are the names: Ben-Hur in the hill country of Ephraim, Ben-Dekir, and Makaz, Sharbim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elan, Beth-Hanan; Ben-Hesed in Alabubath, Sokar, and all the land of Hepher were his; Ben-Abinadab and Naphath, Dor. He was married to Taphath, daughter of Solomon; Barnas, son of Ahilud, and Tanak in Megiddo, and in all of Beth-Shen, next to Zarethan, below Jezreel, from Beth-Shen to Abel-Meholah, across to Jokmeam; Ben-Givir in Ramoth-Gilead. The settlements of Jair, son of Manasseh, in Gilead were his, as well as the region of Agrab in Bashan, and its 60 large walled cities with bronze gate bars; Abinadab, son of Edo, in Mahanaim; Ahimaaz in Naphtali. He had married Basemath, the daughter of Solomon; Barnas, son of Hushai, in Asher and in Eloth; Jehoshaphat, son of Paruah, in Issachar; Shimei, son of Elah, in Benjamin; Geba, son of Yeri, in Gilead, the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the country of Og, king of Bashan. He was the only governor over the district. The people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They ate, they drank, and they were happy. And Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. These countries brought tribute and were Solomon's subjects all his life. Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of the finest flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, 20 of pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. For he ruled over all the kingdoms west of the Euphrates River from Tifsah to Gaza, and had peace on all sides. During Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel from Dan to Beersheba lived in safety, everyone under their own vine and under their own fig tree. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for chariot horses and 12,000 horses. The district governors, each in his month, supplied provisions for King Solomon and all who came to the king's table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. They also brought to the proper place their quotas of barley and straw for the chariot horses and the other horses. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding, as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the east, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else, including Ethan the Ezrahite, wiser than Haman, Calco, and Darda the son of Mahol, and his fame spread to all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He spoke about plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also spoke about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. From all nations people came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. When Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon had been anointed king to succeed his father David, he sent his envoys to Solomon because he had always been on friendly terms with David. Solomon sent back this message to Hiram. You know that because of the wars waged against my father David from all sides, he could not build a temple for the name of the Lord his God until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster. I intend therefore to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David, when he said, Your son whom I put on the throne in your place will build the temple for my name. So give orders that cedars of Lebanon be cut for me. My men will work with yours, and I will pay for your men, whatever wages you set. You know that we have no one so skilled in felling timber as the Sidonians. When Hiram heard Solomon's message, he was greatly pleased, and said, Praise be to the Lord today, for he has given David a wise son to rule over this great nation. So Hiram sent word to Solomon. I have received the message you sent me, and I will do all you want in providing the cedar and juniper logs. My men will haul them down from Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea, and I will float them as rafts by sea to the place you specify. There I will separate them, and you can take them away, and you are to grant my wish by providing food for my royal household. In this way Hiram kept Solomon supplied with all the cedar and juniper logs he wanted, and Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 curs of wheat as food for his household, in addition to 20,000 baths of pressed olive oil. Solomon continued to do this for Hiram year after year. The Lord gave Solomon wisdom just as he had promised him. There were peaceful relations between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hills as workers, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workers. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of high-grade stone to provide a foundation of dressed stone for the temple. The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and workers from Byblos cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. In the 418th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, that is 20 cubits, and projected 10 cubits from the front of the temple. He made narrow windows high up in the temple walls against the walls of the main hall, and in the sanctuary he built a structure around the building in which there were side rooms. The lowest floor was 5 cubits wide, the middle floor 6 cubits, and the third floor 7. He made offset ledges around the outside of the temple so that nothing would be inserted into the temple walls. In building the temple, only blocks addressed at the koi were used, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. The entrance to the lowest floor was on the south side of the temple. A stairway led up to the middle level, and from there to the third. So he built the temple and completed it, roofing it with beams and cedar planks, and he built the side rooms all along the temple. The height of each was 5 cubits, and they were attached to the temple by beams of cedar. The word of the Lord came to Solomon. As for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, observe my laws, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. So Solomon built the temple and completed it. He lined its interior walls with cedar boards, paneling them from the floor of the temple to the ceiling, and covered the floor of the temple with planks of juniper. He portioned off 20 cubits at the rear of the temple with cedar boards from floor to ceiling to form within the temple an inner sanctuary, the most holy place. The main hall in front of this room was 40 cubits long. The inside of the temple was cedar carved with gourds and open flowers. Everything was cedar, no stone was to be seen. He prepared the inner sanctuary within the temple to set the ark of the covenant of the Lord there. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 wide, and 20 high. He overlaid the inside with pure gold, and he also overlaid the altar of cedar. Solomon covered the inside of the temple with pure gold, and he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. So he overlaid the whole interior with gold. He also overlaid with gold the altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary. For the inner sanctuary, he made a pair of cherubim out of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. One wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits long, and the other wing 5 cubits, 10 cubits from wing tip to wing tip. The second cherub also measured 10 cubits, for the 2 cherubim were identical in size and shape. The height of each cherubim was 10 cubits. He placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple with their wings spread out. The wing of one cherub touched one wall, while the wing of the other touched the other wall, and their wings touched each other in the middle of the room. He overlaid the cherubim with gold. On the walls all around the temple, in both the inner and outer rooms, he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. He also covered the floors of both the inner and outer rooms of the temple with gold. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, he made doors out of olive wood that were 1/5 of the width of the sanctuary. And on the 2 olive wood doors, he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid the cherubim and palm trees with hammered gold. In the same way, for the entrance to the main hall, he made door frames out of olive wood that were 1/4 of the width of the hall. He also made 2 doors out of juniper wood, each having 2 leaves that turned in sockets. He carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers on them, and overlaid them with gold hammered evenly over the carvings. And he built the inner courtyard of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams. The foundation of the temple of the Lord was laid in the 4th year in the month of Ziv. In the 11th year in the month of Bul, the 8th month, the temple was finished in all its details according to its specifications. He had spent 7 years building it. And that's 1 Kings chapters 1 to 6. So let's talk about it. 1 Kings is a good book. I really enjoy it. It's one of my favorites of the Bible. Not my favorite, but one of my favorites. Verse 1 of chapter 1. Obviously, we always start in chapter 1. It says, when King David was very old, he could not keep warm, even when they put covers over him. Israel was near the end of the golden years of David's reign. The book of 1 Kings begins with a unified kingdom, glorious and God-centered. It ends with a divided kingdom, degraded and idolatrous. The reasons for Israel's decline appears obvious to us who can read the whole account in the Bible. The people and their leaders failed to obey God. We are vulnerable to the same forces that brought about Israel's decay: greed, jealousy, selfishness, lust for power, weakening of marriage vows, and superficiality in our devotion to God. As we read about these tragic events in Israel's history, we must see ourselves in the mirror of their experiences and commit ourselves every day to following God wholeheartedly. Verse 4 says, the woman was very beautiful. She took care of the king and waited on him, but the king had no sexual relations with her. David was about 70 years old. His health had deteriorated from years of hardship. Abishai served as his nurse and helped him keep warm. In times when polygamy was accepted and kings had harems, this action was not considered offensive. He didn't sleep with Abishag. Verse 5 says, Now Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, put himself forward and said, I will be king. So he got chariots and horses ready with 50 men to run ahead of him. Adonijah was David's fourth son and the logical choice to succeed him as king. David's first son, Amnon, had been killed by Absalom for having raped his sister. David's second son, Daniel, had probably died by this time. His third son, Absalom, had died in an earlier rebellion. Although many people expected Adonijah to be the next king, David and God had other plans. Adonijah decided to seize the throne without David's knowledge. He knew that Solomon, not he, was David's first choice to be the next king. This was why he did not invite Solomon and David's loyal advisors when he declared himself king, but his deceptive plans to gain the throne were unsuccessful. The proud Adonijah was self-exalted and self-defeated. Verse 6 says, where is it? His father had never rebuked him by asking, Why do you behave as you do? He was also very handsome and was born next after Absalom. God-fearing people like David and Samuel were used by God to lead nations, but nevertheless they had significant problems in failing relationships. Leaders cannot take for granted the spiritual well-being of their children. They are used to having others follow their direction, but they cannot expect their children to manufacture faith upon request. Moral and spiritual character takes years to build, and it requires constant attention and patient discipline. David served God well as a king, but as a parent he often failed to both God and his children. Don't let your service to God, even in leadership positions, take up so much of your time and energy that you neglect your other God-given responsibilities. Because David had not adequately disciplined or reprimanded his son while he was growing up, Adonijah did not know how to live within appropriate limits. The result was that he always wanted his own way and did whatever he wished, regardless of how it affected others and without respect for God's wishes. Like his brother Absalom, he was good-looking, but no matter how cute undisciplined children may be in the eyes of their parents, undisciplined adults destroy themselves and others. As you set limits for your children and discipline them when they stray outside those limits, you are teaching them to develop the self-restraint they will need in order to become emotionally healthy and responsible adults. Verse 9 says, Adonijah then sacrificed sheep, cattle, and fattened calves at the stone of Zoheleth, and near in Rogel, he invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah. When Saul was anointed king, fellowship offerings were sacrificed as a reminder of the nation's covenant with God given at Mount Sinai. Adonijah wanted sacrifices offered, perhaps hoping to legitimize his takeover, but Adonijah was not God's choice to succeed David. Sealing a action with religious ceremony does not make it God's will. Verse 11 says, Then Nathan asked Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, Have you not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, has become king, and our Lord David knows nothing about it? When Nathan learned of Adonijah's conspiracy, he immediately tried to stop it. He was a man of both faith and action. He knew that Solomon should rightly be king, and he moved quickly when he saw someone else trying to take the throne. We often know what is right, but hesitate to act on it. Perhaps we don't want to get involved, or maybe we are afraid of people's reactions, or maybe we are just plain lazy. Don't stop and pray at good intentions or angry feelings. Take the action needed to correct the situation. As wife of the king, Bathsheba was highly influential in the royal palace. Verse 13 says, Go into King David and say to him, My lord the king, did you not swear to me your servant, surely Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? The Bible does not record David's promise that Solomon would be Israel's next king, but it is clear that Solomon was the choice of both David and God. Verse 33 says, He said to them, Take your Lord's servants with you, and have Solomon my son mount on my own mule, and take him down to Gihon. We might expect King David to send a great war horse to bring his son Solomon to the ceremony. Instead, Solomon rode David's mule. In David's time, mules were prized animals ridden by the wealthy, powerful, and royal. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, he came in not on a horse, but on a donkey, signifying his royal status as the King of Kings. verse 39 says, Zadok the priest took the horn of oil from the sacred tent and anointed Solomon. Then they sounded the trumpet, and all the people shouted, "Long live King Solomon." The sacred anointing was used to anoint Israel's kings and high priests, as well as to dedicate certain objects to God. The sacred tent where the oil was kept was probably the tent David had set up to shelter the Ark of the Covenant. It was not the tabernacle Moses had carried in the wilderness. That tabernacle was still at Gibeon. The recipe and uses for the sacred anointing oil are found in Exodus chapter 30, verses 22 to 33. Verse 49 to 51 says, if I can find it. At this, all Adonijah's guests rose in alarm and dispersed, but Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, went and took hold of the horns of the altar. Then Solomon was told, "Adonijah is afraid of King Solomon and is clinging to the horns of the altar." He says, "Let King Solomon swear to me today that he will not put his servant to death with the sword." Adonijah thought he would be safe by clutching the horns or corner posts at the sacred altar of burnt offering in the courtyard of the sacred tent. By doing this, he hoped to place himself under God's protection. Solomon granted Adonijah a reprise, hoping that this would end Adonijah's conspiracy. Unfortunately, it did not, and he was later executed. At the execution of Adonijah, Joab ran and clutched the horns of the altar, hoping for safety, but Solomon had Joab killed right at the altar. This punishment was appropriate justice for a cold-blooded murder such as Joab. Sometimes it takes courage getting caught before we are willing to give up our schemes. When Adonijah learned that his plans were doomed to fail, he ran in panic to the altar, the place of God's mercy and forgiveness. He went there, however, after his plans for treason had been exposed. If Adonijah had first considered what God wanted, he might have avoided trouble. Don't wait until you have made a mess of your life before you run to God, and seek God's guidance before you even act. Verse 52 to 53 says, Solomon replied, "If he shows himself to be worthy, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground. But if evil is found in him, he will die." Then King Solomon sent men, and they brought him down from the altar. And Adonijah came and bowed down to King Solomon, and Solomon said, "Go to your home." While Adonijah feared for his life and expected the severest punishment, Solomon simply dismissed his brother and sent him home. As a new king, Solomon had the power to kill his rivals, something Adonijah probably would have done had his conspiracy succeeded, but Solomon acted as if he had nothing to prove, thus demonstrating his true authority and power. Sometimes forgiving a personal attack shows more strength than lashing out in revenge. Trying to prove one's power and authority often proves only one's fear and self-doubt. Only after Adonijah made another attempt to secure royal power was Solomon forced to have him executed. Verse 3 to 4 of chapter 2 says, "And observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel." David stressed to Solomon the need to make God and his laws the center of his personal life and government in order to preserve the kingdom, as God had promised to do. This promise from God had two parts. One part was conditional and depended upon the king's actions. The other part was unconditional. God's conditional promise was that David and his descendants would remain in office, asking only when they... I don't know why I got confused. God's conditional promise was that David and his descendants would remain in office as kings only when they honored and obeyed him. When David's descendants failed to do this, they lost the throne. God's unconditional promise was that David's line would go on forever. This was fulfilled in the birth of Jesus Christ, a descendant of David, who was also the eternal Son of God. David, whose life exemplified obedience, gave a well-seasoned advice to his son, the next king. It would be up to Solomon to follow it. And we see David had some harsh advice for Solomon concerning his enemies. He wanted them killed. He wanted to kill... Who was he wanted to kill? He wasn't going to kill... He wasn't going to kill Abiathar, but he killed Joab. Was he going to kill Abiathar? No, he wasn't going to kill Abiathar, was he? I can't remember. Hold on. Shimei would die. And Abner would return home. Alright, yeah. David had some harsh advice for Solomon concerning his enemies. This advice was designed to help the young king establish and secure his throne, and it was directed only toward blatant enemies, those who oppose God by opposing God's appointed king. Legally, David was asking Solomon to give his enemies the punishment they deserved. He was both against civil law and God's law for Shimei to curse a king. Joab epitomizes those who are ruthless in accomplishing their goals. To Joab, winning was everything. He wanted to gain power for himself and protect it. In contrast, Barzillai stands for those who are loyal to God and live by his standards. When offered glory, for example, he unselfishly asked that it had been given to his son. Do you take all the credit for yourself, or do you acknowledge God's help and give credit to others? Verse 13 to 22, we see Adonijah ask Bathsheba for Abishag. And this was not a case of thwarted love. Adonijah had more in mind than his supposed love for Abishag. Although she was still a virgin, Abishag was considered part of David's harem. Adonijah wanted Abishag because possessing the king's harem was equivalent to claiming the throne. Absalom had done the same thing in his rebellion against David. Solomon well understood what Adonijah was trying to do. In this plot against Solomon, all the conspirators lost. Adonijah and Joab were killed, and the priest Abiathar lost his job. Yeah, Abiathar was kicked out and went to home. They all thought they would gain something by their alliance: influence, position, recognition, authority. But they had a poor leader and wrong motives, and they were working against God's will. Consider your motives carefully before making alliance with others, and make sure your motives and actions are aligned with what God wants. Motives are important. Be sure you understand yours and those of your leaders and peers. Verse 26 to 27 says, To Abiathar the priest, the king said, Go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carry the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships. So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken of Shiloh about the house of Eli. As a young man, Abiathar had been the only one to escape when King Saul had massacred all the priests in the city of Nob. Abiathar had then become the high priest under David, and he remained loyal to David throughout his reign. But when Abiathar supported Adonijah's wrongful claim to the throne after David's death, Solomon forced him to give up the priesthood, fulfilling the prophecy of 1 Samuel. Chapter 2, verse 27 to 36, that Eli's descendants will not continue to serve as priests. Verse 31 says, Then the king commanded Benaiah, Do as he says, strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. Joab had spent his life trying to defend his position as David's commander. Twice, David had tried to replace him, and both times Joab had treacherously killed his rivals before they could assume command. Because Joab was in his service, David was ultimately responsible for these senseless deaths. But for political and military reasons, David had decided not to publicly punish Joab. Instead, he had put a curse on Joab and his family. Solomon, in punishing Joab, was publicly declaring that David was not part of Joab's crimes, thus removing the guilt from David and placing it on Joab where it belonged. Verse 35 says, The king put Benaiah son of Jehoiada over the army in Joab's position and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest. Abiathar the high priest and Joab the army commander were key men in David's kingdom, but when they conspired against Solomon, they were replaced with Zadok and Benaiah. Zadok, a descendant of Aaron, had been a prominent priest during David's reign, and he was also loyal to Solomon after David's death. He was put in charge of the Ark of the Covenant. His descendants were in charge of the temple until its destruction. At one time, Benaiah was one of David's mighty men and the captain of David's bodyguard. Verse 46 says, Then the king gave the order to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. The kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. Solomon ordered the executions of Adonijah, Joab, and Shimei. He also forced Abiathar out as priest, and then appointed new men to take their places. He took these actions swiftly, securing his grip on the kingdom by executing justice and tying up loose ends that could affect the future stability of his kingdom. Solomon was promoting peace, not bloodshed. He was a man of peace in two ways. He did not go to war, and he put an end to internal rebellion. Verse 1 says of chapter 3, Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. Marriage between royal families was a common practice in the ancient Middle East, because it secured peace between people groups. Although Solomon's martial alliances built friendships with surrounding nations, they were also the beginning of his downfall. These relationships became inroads for idolatrous ideas and practices. Solomon's foreign wives brought their gods to Jerusalem and eventually lured him into worshipping false gods. It is easy to minimize religious differences in order to encourage the development of a friendship or relationship. What can seem small while dating, however, will have an enormous impact upon a marriage. The early stages of falling in love easily leads to idealism. And it can be easy in this season to minimize religious differences as something that can be worked out later. The reality, however, is that God gives us standards to follow for all of our relationships, including marriage, for our own good. If we follow God's will, we will not be led away from our true focus. You must be compatible in a relationship in what you and the other person believe, and also in how you both practice those beliefs. If not, compromising your own relationship with God is inevitable. God's law said that the Israelite could make sacrifices only in specified places. This was to prevent the people from instituting their own methods of worship and allowing pagan practices to creep in. But many Israelites, including Solomon, made sacrifices at the surrounding hills. He sacrificed at high places, as it says in the Bible. Solomon loved God, but this act was sinful, sacrificing at the high places. It also took the offerings out of the watchful care of priests and ministers loyal to God and opened the way for false teaching to be tied to these sacrifices. God appeared to Solomon to grant him wisdom at night, not during the sacrifice. God honored his prayer, but did not condone his sacrifice. When given the chance to have anything in the world, Solomon asked for wisdom and a discerning heart in order to lead well and to make right decisions. According to the New Testament, we can ask God for this same wisdom, by the way. Notice that Solomon asked for discernment to carry out his job. He did not ask God to do the job for him. We should not ask God to do for us what he wants to do through us. Instead, we should ask God to give us the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to follow through on it. Solomon asked for wisdom, discernment, not wealth, but God gave him riches, fame, and long life as well. While God does not promise riches or fame to those who follow him, he gives us what we need if we put his kingdom, his interests, and his principles first. Setting your sight on wealth and possessions will only leave you dissatisfied, because even if you get the riches you crave, you will still want something more. But if you put God and his work first, he will satisfy your deepest needs because he knows just what they are. Verse 12 says, if I can find it, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Solomon received a wise and discerning heart from God, but it was up to Solomon to apply that wisdom to all areas of his life. Solomon was obviously wise in governing the nation, but he was foolish in running his household. Wisdom is both the ability to discern what is best and the strength of character to act upon that knowledge. While Solomon remained wise all his life, he did not always act upon his wisdom. And then we see two women dispute. One laid on a baby and it killed it, so she swapped the other woman's baby who was alive and framed that the other woman killed the baby. And they went to Solomon saying, "Oh, that's my son." But the other one was like, "No, that's my son." Solomon's settlement of this dispute is a classic example of his wisdom. This wise ruling was verification that God had answered Solomon's prayer and given him a discerning heart. We have God's wisdom available to us as we practice and request it, but like Solomon, we must put it into action. Only then will the benefits of wisdom bear fruit in the lives of others. And we see that in chapter 4, Solomon was well organized, with 11 chief officials who had their own specific responsibilities. 12 district governors, one for each tribe, and a general manager in charge of the district governors. Each person had a specific responsibility or territory to manage. This organization was essential to maintain the government's effectiveness. It was a wise move by a wise man. Good organization is an important aspect of good stewardship. It helps people work together in harmony and ensures that the desired goals will be reached. Verse 7 of chapter 4 says, Solomon had 12 district governors over all Israel who supplied provisions for the king and the royal household. Each one had to provide supplies for 1 month in the year. During Solomon's reign, each of the 12 tribes was responsible for providing food for the king's household for 1 month of a year. Since Solomon has 700 wives and 300 concubines, not to mention children, servants, and livestock, a lot of food was required. The prophet Samuel had warned the people about heavy taxation when they had come to him begging for a king. Throughout most of his reign, Solomon applied his wisdom well because he sought God. The fruits of this wisdom were peace, security, and prosperity for the nation. Solomon's era is often looked upon as the ideal for any nation to become when united in its trust and obedience to God. We see in chapter 5, verse 2 to 3, it says, Solomon sent back this message to Hiram. You know that because of the wars waged against my father David from all sides, he could not build a temple for the name of the Lord his God until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. When David offered to build a temple, God said no through the prophet Nathan. God wanted a peacemaker, not a warrior, to build his house of prayer. Verse 8 to 9 says, So Hiram sent word to Solomon, I have received the messages you sent me and will do all you want in providing the cedar and juniper logs. My men will haul them down from Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea, and I will float them as rafts by sea to the place you specify. There I will separate them, and you can take them away, and you are to grant my wish by providing food for my royal household. Solomon asked Hiram to send cedar and juniper wood for the temple because these were precious woods, considered the best for large buildings. They were coarse-grained, very hard, and not resistant. Equally important, they were beautiful and had a fragrant scent. The logs were tied into rafts and floated down the seacoast from Tyre to a port in Israel, from which they were carried overland to Jerusalem. Verse 13 to 14 says, King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them off to Lebanon in ships of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon drafted 3 times the number of workers needed for gathering and transporting timber from Lebanon for the temple project. Then he arranged their schedules so they wouldn't have to be away from home for long periods of time. This group of 30,000 workers was chosen from all the tribes of Israel. Most other workers, including the laborers in Corey, were non-Israelites. This showed Solomon's special concern for the welfare of his Israelite workers and the importance he placed on the welfare of their families. The strength of a nation is in direct proportion to the strength of its families. Solomon wisely recognized that families should always be a top priority. As you structure your own work or arrange the schedules of others, watch for the impact of your plans on families. Make every effort to strengthen and protect them. Verse 18 says, The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and workers from Byblos cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. Byblos, also called Gebal, was located north of what is now Beerit, near the Sedir forest. These men were Phoenicians, probably skilled as shipbuilders but employed for this project. Verse 3 of chapter 6 says, The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, that is 20 cubits. The portico was an entry area, something like a large veranda. Verse 4 says, He made narrow windows high up in the temple walls. These narrow recessed windows were near the tops of the walls to help light the center of the temple. Verse 7 says, In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. In honor of God, the temple of Jerusalem was built without the sound of a hammer or any other tool at the building site. This meant that the stone had to be cut and shaped miles away at the quarry. The people's honor and respect for God extended to every aspect of constructing this house of worship. This detail is recorded not to teach us how to build a church, but to show us the importance of demonstrating care, concern, honor, and respect for God and His sanctuary. Verse 13 says, And I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. This verse summarizes the temple's main purpose. God promised that his eternal presence would never leave the temple as long as one condition was met. The Israelites had to obey God's law. Knowing how many laws they had to follow, we may think this condition was difficult, but the Israelites' situation was much like ours today. They were not cut off from God for failing to keep some small part of the law. Forgiveness was provided for all their sins, no matter how large or small. As you read the history of the kings, you will see that law-breaking was the result, not the cause, of estrangement from God. The kings abandoned God in their hearts first and then failed to keep his laws. When we close our hearts to God and refuse to listen to him, we soon lose his power and presence in our lives. Verse 14 says, "So Solomon built the temple and completed it." Solomon's temple was meant to be even more beautiful than Solomon's palace. It was the place where the Israelites would pray and offer sacrifices to God. As a dwelling place for God's glorious presence, it was fitting for it to be ornate and beautiful. It had small inside dimensions because most worshippers would gather outside to pray and sing. And that is it. That is chapters 1 to 6. Not that much. I mean, it's kind of a lot, but not that much. I'm going to show you the temple now. It's not the actual temple. It's like a, what do you call it? Blueprint, I guess. So you can see, like, here's the holy place, the most holy place, and you can see the Ark of the Covenant right there, that little small box. Holy place right here, and the windows would be up here, so they would shine on the center. Remember? And here's the bronze basins. This is the sea. This is the altar where they sacrifice. Bronze pillars, portico. Here's the two cherubim that guard the mercy seat. This looks like the showbread. Right here, the showbread. Oh yeah, here's the veil as well that torn in two down whenever. It's not the same temple that torn in two. The veil where the veil torn in two, but it was like a different temple that Herod rebuilt. And when Jesus died, the temple Herod rebuilt had a veil that torn in two to show that God was tearing away from his covenant and made a new one. Also, there's gold lampstands, the menorahs, and an altar of incense. Here's a 9-candle menorah with a Star of David on it. And here's a little mini Ark of the Covenant I have. Pretty nice. It glows. Did you hear that the people found the CIA found the Ark of the Covenant? I don't believe it. I don't know. It's weird because I want to think that only the Levites could still touch it, but ever since God broke away from his covenant through the death of Jesus Christ and made the new covenant, I'm thinking, like, would Levites still be the only ones who are able to touch the Ark of the Covenant? And I'm unsure. They even had to carry poles for it. So even the Levites had to carry it on poles, the Ark of the Covenant. So that's it. 1 Kings chapter 1 to 6, and now we're going to pray. Lord, I thank you for today. I ask that you give us wisdom. I ask that you give us discernment, Lord. I ask that our heart can stay true to you and that our love can be unending for you as your love has been even more unending for us. I ask that if anyone is suffering, that they can suffer joyfully, knowing that you will uphold them with your righteous right hand. And I ask that if no one has you, they can find you. And if they already do have you, that they continue to pursue you and pursue others in your name, so that they may also pursue you as well, Lord. I pray all this in your name. I thank you for all this, and amen. Thank you for watching. God bless. Good night, and love y'all.